my friends. Good to see you all. Another name, and the locals would probably say not Sheremetev Palace, but the Fountain House. Uh, I bet this palace looks familiar. It's just on the Fontanka River. That's why we call it the Fountain House, because it's just by the Fontanka River. And I think maybe this is the most recognizable because it actually well, it has this private, a little docking station. It's just there. And I think even just yeah. So when I did the pre-recorded canal cruise, we actually started from the Fontanka River. So yeah, this is just like, and on the opposite side of the river, there is the Fabergé Museum. So we have been to that area a couple of times, just a couple of times. And yes, this is the palace that is here thanks to Peter the Great. In fact, Peter the Great, when he established the city, he gave a lot of just land for free to his associates, the people who served him. And one of the areas was given to the Sheremetev family. And this house belonged to the Sheremetev family up until the revolution, so for 3 centuries. Um, and Peter himself had never visited this house because it was built after Peter's death already. But this area used to be basically the city limits. You probably remember that that up until the turn of the 19th century, Fontanka River was the city limits, and this was already considered the suburban area at that point. Now it's in the very heart of the city, just very heart of the city. But Peter had been to these places many times because he was in charge of the construction of the city, and he was in charge of the construction of a number of facilities, and also his own palace on the Fontanka River, just really a stone throw away from the Fountain House, from that plot of land. But the house had not been built at that point. So the land was given to Boris Sheremetev, Count Sheremetev, who was a friend of Peter ever since Moscow times. And he, just like Peter, was I would say that the entire Sheremetev family was very much of a European mindset. He never liked Moscow. He never liked this conservative lifestyle and the architecture and all this. Just it was not really his thing. And he was one of the very few like-minded people that Peter needed, and thanks to whom all these Peter's undertakings, well, took just really happened and came about because Peter couldn't have done all that alone. And Boris Sheremetev accompanied him in a lot of campaigns, and he was ready to sacrifice his own life, and he did. Many times got wounded, and one time he was really, really badly wounded in a really important battle, but he just pulled it through. And I'm not going to be like given a very detailed story of the Sheremetev family just now, but also as the tour goes, I'll be sharing more stories. For example, but it's important also to understand who established the building, who built the building we're going to be visiting today. And it's important to give you at least some information before we get inside a house. Well, this is an illustration in the Academy of Sciences, and this is Peter the Great during the Poltava battle, a very important, one of the most important battles, in the course of this great Northern War against the Swedish in the 1700s. And right behind Peter the Great, there is Sheremetev. He's the one wearing the red coat. That's him. So he was always next to Peter the Great, not really just sitting somewhere, in the back row. And it was exactly Boris Sheremetev who, in one of the campaigns, um, got a captive, and it was a young girl, Martha Skavronska. She was just, taken hostage basically in one of the campaigns from the territory of modern day Estonia, more or less. And she first was his well, a laundry girl, a servant, but obviously it was more than that. It was like his, you understand, a dodgy business. And then she was taken by Menshikov. She was like, this woman was like just somebody's property. She was basically a slave, honestly. Well, not this barbaric sense, but she was. And then at the Menshikov house, another friend of Peter the Great, Peter saw her, and that's how he fell. And that's when he fell in love with her. It was love at first sight, and then she became Catherine the First. So this woman just was the wife of an, well, let's say Estonian officer, and then she became empress when Peter passed away. Catherine became the empress of the country. Crazy, yeah, and it's all thanks to Sheremetev. And then so Boris Sheremetev had children, and one of them was Pyotr Sheremetev. Well, Pyotr Borisovich. Borisovich is a patronymic name, just in case you forgot. So I'm keeping these patronymic names for you to be able to follow the connections, but obviously I'm not expecting you to remember all that. But it's just important to remember that the Sheremetevs, from the very beginning till the very end, remained very close to the crown, and they were all, either diplomats or they were counselors, well, courtiers of this, of that sort, and they remained one of the richest people in the country for sure, absolutely. And he was married to Barbara. She was from the Cherkassky family. It's another very noble aristocratic dynasty, which even doubled the wealth of the Sheremetev family. That was insane. They were so rich that they actually started construction of dozens of palaces and estates across the country because they owned so much land in a lot of regions of the Russian Empire. And among those estates would be this suburban estate, which they would call the Fountain House. Because it was the suburbs, right? It used to be the suburbs, and it's way more than you see. So first it was just the one house, but then there would be more buildings added, and there was a huge garden right beside the house because there obviously had to be a garden. And but the construction continued already with the let's say with other descendants. For example, so the grandchild was Nikolai Sheremetev, and Nikolai Sheremetev is probably one of the most known to you, at least from my tours, because the Sheremetev family preferred to live in Moscow. After Peter passed away, they preferred to live in Moscow, at least most of the time. But it's because of a certain love story when they had to leave Moscow and come back to Saint Petersburg. It's because of the love story of Nikolai Sheremetev and his marriage to one of his slaves or serf girls. Okay, if it sounds a little nicer, let's say serf girls. Sheremetevs were so rich and they were so into arts and theater that they had their small private theaters everywhere. And their huge theater in under Moscow became one of the. At some point, it was even better than the imperial theaters. It was crazy. People wanted to see this theater, and it was a big event. Every performance was a big event, and it was mainly because of the very good actors. But those actors were Sheremetev's property. They were serfs. It was a serf theater, and the star was Praskovia Kovalova. And to every actor or to every actress in this private theater, Sheremetevs would be given last names, and the last names would be the names of different gemstones. So Praskovia Kovalova which is a very typical, ordinary, average last name for a Russian person. Kovalova would be given another last name, Zemchugova, coming from pearl. So she was a pearl girl. And he just, Nikolai Sheremetev had dozens of girls as his servants. And he had like a harem. So every night he could just have another girl, and that's how it was. It was really nasty, but it was the same in the States, everywhere where the slave trade and slavery was. That's what it was. Women exploitation, This just goes without saying. And that was the same with Nikolai Sheremetyev. But once he had his eyes set on Praskovia, things changed. He just felt crazy in love, and he stopped seeing any other serf girls like forever. It was some crazy love, and they got married, but he couldn't really get married that easily because she was a serf girl, right? So, in order to pull this through, Sheremetyev had to bribe people, had to fake a what do you call it? He paid people who were able to find, like in inverted commas, her trace her birth to one of the old dynasties, small noble dynasty in Poland. The documents were, and for that they had to find like 12 witnesses. So he had to bribe 12 people who could testify that, yes, she is actually from that old Polish dynasty, but it didn't work. The Emperor Paul the First, who was son of Catherine the Great, didn't recognize that. And eventually, it was a big scandal because they're living together anyway, but they had to flee. Eventually, they left Moscow and came to St. Petersburg, and they lived in this palace. So the first Sheremetev family, the first Sheremetev that actually lived full time in this house was Nikolai Sheremetev and Praskovia Zemchugova, and their son, Count Dmitry Sheremetev, well, was the child that was born, and actually he was conceived while they were still not really officially married. But anyway, so they eventually, the next monarch, Alexander the First, recognized the marriage, and Nikolai Sheremetev was born with his all rights reserved, so to speak. It was all good. But 2 weeks after Dmitry was born, Praskovia passed away. She had tuberculosis, which only worsened because they had to live in complete isolation because the court, even though officially the marriage was recognized, people could not really, the court could, and the nobility, they just could not stand a serf girl. Just, it's like in the Pretty Woman movie, right? But just a lot worse. But pretty much the same story. By the way, the portraits of Dmitri, if you just, I think it's important and I think it's interesting. I'm going to show you just once again the portrait of their son, Count Dmitry Sheremetev, was painted by Orest Kiprensky. Orest Kiprensky was a pretty, a well-known Russian artist of the first half of the 19th century, and they were very close friends with Dmitry Sheremetev because Orest Kiprensky also happened to be a child of a nobleman and a serf girl. And Sheremetev family supported Orest Kiprensky, and Orest Kiprensky created a great deal of portraits of Russian nobility in the 19th century. And, I must have shown you at least dozens of them a gazillion times, on my tours. So it's and Dmitry Sheremetev was exactly one of those Sheremetevs who nearly doubled the collection of artworks of the family, and he continued just the growth of the collection till the end of his life. And this collection was spread among all the palaces and estates that belonged to Sheremetevs, and they had hundreds of them. By that time, they had hundreds. But this place became his home because this is where his mother passed away. This is where his childhood was. And the core of the collection because it wasn't just the artworks. Most of the artwork that belonged to Sheremetev family can now be found scattered among the museums in St. Petersburg, Moscow, and everywhere else. But it's also because he collected a lot of musical instruments and his descendants as well. So the core of the collection is the collection of the Sheremetev family, thanks to Dmitry Sheremetev, but not only. So I'm also sharing, some more photos from my camera roll, from open sources, and we, after all, we're also going to explore a little bit of the garden. But first, let's finally visit the home. So I just had to give you this little bit of the introduction just to understand what kind of Sheremetevs and on what grounds and how exactly they lived in the house. So for a long time, actually throughout the 18th century, it was mostly just uninhabited or somebody else would be renting. But then starting from the 19th century, it already became like a family nest. A lot of architects worked on this house because, well, first it was built in the 1700s, but then, rebuilt and rebuilt multiple times. So many architects were involved, such as Sava Chebakinsky, one of the biggest architects of the 1700s. And then during the times of Catherine the Great and Giacomo Quarenghi, who also created a lot of artworks and also was in charge of the construction of the big theater of Sheremetevs back and under Moscow in Arkhangelskaya estate, for example, and also other estates. And I actually, have quite enough content and can easily ask Oleg next time he goes to Moscow to film it for us. Just let me know if you want me to take you to those gorgeous estates under Moscow. I have tons of photos, and again, it's not going to be an issue, but just do let me know. It's not but like my colleagues Anna and Tanya don't are not really doing tours of Moscow, so I don't think it's going to be released in the show because there is no show, and show must go on. So just let me know. I'll probably need to ask them, but I don't think they will be against it. And anyway, so it's just going to be, an undertaking because Oleg goes to Moscow very often because he works like between actually not just the two cities, but also he has to travel to Dubai every once in a while. But whenever he's in Moscow next time, he'll be delighted to go to all those palaces. But anyway, we're inside the palace now, and this is the main staircase. The main staircase is also the result of a lot of changes, but in the heart of the staircase, of course, best Italian marble, there will be the portrait of the founder of the dynasty, so to speak, Boris Sheremetev, the close associate, loyal associate of Peter the Great. Like I introduced him to you already. And first, we're going to see some, private, well, not the private, but the interiors without the exhibit. So because it's the house of the musical instruments, but not only that, it's also, and well, the home of a very rich family. So we're going to see just a lot of interiors. And then we're going to see, it's like gonna be two in one. We're going to see the beautiful interiors and also the collection of the musical instruments, just, encompassing 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and a little bit of the 20th century after all. So, by the way, this chandelier is of the 19th century from Murano glass. Right? So one of the Sheremetevs who also contributed a lot to the establishing of the museum and was the son of Dmitry, who, well, so it means he was the grandson of Nikolai Sheremetev and Praskovia. So this is how I'm going to be, switching between the Sheremetevs, and I'll be trying to help you connect the dots and understand which of the Sheremetevs I'm talking about. So their grandson and the son of Dmitry, Sergei Sheremetev, was the one who inherited everything, who inherited the really great art collection, musical instrument collection, and continued amassing everything. He just also inherited the love of collecting and a very good taste. So, and he was basically the one who witnessed the revolution together with his wife, Countess Ekaterina Sheremeteva. The two of them were like, they had this just huge collection, absolutely priceless. it worth millions, but it was also priceless. And they knew that 1970 was just about to put everything to an end, and then nothing would ever really mean anything anymore. That was that wasn't easy. And also, they actually were the first ones to put together the family tree, and they created this gigantic, enormous family tree tracing the lineage up to the 15th and 14th century. Crazy. And when you enter the palace, your itinerary actually starts from this room, which was the chambermaid room. The servants, the what do you call it? Well, okay, let's say the chambermaids, and then this word just slipped my mind. Okay, anyway, the servants just would be there in this cameraman, kammerdinger, chamberman, chambermaid would would be staying in these rooms, like preceding, the rooms. And this room doesn't really have a lot of interior, but it's probably one of the most unassuming rooms in the house. But it kind of gives you a little introduction, and this is where me, a humble servant, as a licensed tour guide to this museum. This is where we would actually tell you the story of the Sheremetevs, and that's why now you understand what Peter the Great has to do with everything, because it's all because of him, due to him, because of him, for him. And you do remember that Sheremetevs had love of theater art, and they had their theaters everywhere, every estate. This was not the exception. This is also their home theater, little domestic theater that can accommodate, I don't really remember, but several hundred, couple of hundreds of people. It's just a small private theater. Just that. Crazy. It's in one of the side wings of the house. And palace, not the house, it's the palace. That's the palace in the full sense of the word. And remember, and then Sergei Sheremetyev was like, okay, in 1917, I have this millions of artworks. I have something to do. So what he did, he filed an application just recognizing to the provisional government and then to the Bolshevik government, claiming that this was the object of heritage of the incredible importance. There weren't really any terms at that point. So he just wrote this personal letter to the Minister of Enlightenment, Minister of Education, Mikhail Lunacharsky, and the house was recognized as the heritage. And Sheremetyev was appointed the head of the museum. So it actually became the museum of, let's say, the court life. And the museum existed up until basically the 1930s. But in order to survive, the museum had to comply, let's say, with the demands and interests of this target audience, which was the workers. So sometimes they had to throw all sorts of exhibitions on the life of the peasants in the Russian Empire. And this is the exhibition they had to arrange, and this exhibition was held in the theater. This is the theater building, so in the theater. It's just the workers of the museum. And then after 1930s, the museum closed, and they opened the well, they opened a different museum, not of the aristocratic life, but of the mathematics and science. And the head of the museum was Yakov Perelman, Jew, who was he was a mathematician, and he was in charge of the museum. The museum was very interesting. When we were told about the museum and how it operated, it was just like crazy. Honestly, it felt like, hold on a second. Yeah, so it was like it felt like it was a little branch, of Guggenheim Museum, maybe, just in all the scope of works that they had, and all this. great interactive exhibit that they had. This is just the photographs of the museum in the 1930s. Well, visitors just touching the exhibits. And this was also in one of the rooms of the museum. Like there was a big room about astronomy. It was very interesting. But everything was put to an end. So obviously during the siege of Leningrad, the museum was closed. However, the palace wasn't really badly damaged. Mostly, like some um, collateral damage, here and there, and just was neglected. But then it reopened as a museum of Arctic and Antarctic. It was just a big research facility and the Museum of Arctic and Antarctic. And this was a big model built in the basement of the house. They were researching the work and the experimenting with the vessels with for the ice well, just icebreakers. And it was all done in the estate of the 18th century. Anyway, now, well, and then the museum Arctic and Antarctic closed. There was a massive restoration project, in full swing, and then the museum reopened, like in the 1980s, 1990s, around that. So the museum is roughly 35 years old, the way it looks nowadays. I mean, the Museum of the Musical Instruments. So we are visiting the proper interiors, the antique room, and again, everything in this house, you see the furniture, it belonged to the Sheremetev family. The artworks, it's not the collection. Almost, let's say, 90% of the exhibits. It's not the collection of the Sheremetev family because the artworks were distributed among the museums of the of Russia and Saint Petersburg, including the Russian Museum, including the Hermitage Museum, of course. And also, a lot of the items were sold abroad because, that's what the Bolsheviks like to do, because the country needed money desperately. But the furniture, it belonged to the Sheremetevs because everything was preserved and sent into the storage. Of course, some items were sold, some items were lost, but these things belong to the Sheremetevs. But the musical instruments, it's not only the Sheremetevs collection, it's many, many, many more. But the artworks you will see on display will be from different collections, from also noble families, from the aristocratic homes. In the antique room, well, it was just a fad, right? In the 19th century, this historism style and classicism never really stopped being never really stopped being a trend. So why it's called the antique room, because it has, all these antique decorations, and it also in you like know you are in the Museum of Musical Instruments, because in every room they will still have a sort of musical instrument. For example, there are a lot of pianos of the 19th century that used to belong to noble families across the empire, and also these plates are actually from the 1700s, from the 18th century. We were told that they were brought by Boris Sheremetev from Europe, and it does look a bit rustic, like a little bit. It's giving me like 18th century vibes rather than 19th century vibes. However, these plates are way older than the decorations in this room. This is the 19th century decoration. So the palace was built in the 18th century, but none of the rooms actually have preserved the decoration of the 18th century, obviously. So it's 19th century, and it's mostly from the times of Nikolai Sheremetev and his wife Praskovia Zhemchugova. I love showing old photos. Luckily, we have a number of them. This is what this antique room looked like back in the days. You wouldn't see a lot of rooms. Like not all the rooms will have 100% original decoration. Such as, for example, this room used to have upholstery, I believe, and it during the times of Sergei Dmitrievich, who was the grandson of Nikolai and Praskovia, right? That's sweethearts, Richard Gere and Julia Roberts of 19th century, late 18th century Russia. So he was their grandson. He already used a lot of rooms just as a museum of the Sheremetev family. And here was exhibited the collection of silverware and also a lot of figurines. And you can see those plates, right? You can see above the mantelpiece, you can see the plates. So those are the plates that had been stored in the family ever since like Saint Peter, well, not Saint Peter, Peter the Great times. Yeah, so impressive. White dining room. This room has been quite recently restored, by the way. And this is it's called white dining room because of the artificial marble on the walls, 19th century, but restored. And the fireplace. By the way, fireplaces are all original. That's great because the Bolsheviks could easily just remove and take them to different museums. So, but this is the original fireplace, 19th century. Well, what I like about Sheremetev Palace, because not only do they have some really amazing musical instruments, they also really have some of the finest examples of Chippendale furniture. And I love Chippendale, but don't really have this much of Chippendale. I don't know. It's probably just because Chippendale wasn't that much Rococo. It was like a practical Rococo. I really like it. So it's ornate, but not too ornate. It's not excess of all these details, and I love it. I think it's probably one of my favorite styles, but not the most. But I love it. And Sheremetevs had really good collection of Chippendale, really, really good. And we still have a lot of them in this palace. And um, the the artworks, as I said, the artworks can be of the 19th century. They can be of the really like late and turn of the 20th century. This should not really confuse you. As I said, the artworks have nothing to do with the Sheremetev family. A very few artworks will be there that are originally from the Sheremetev collection. But the rock crystal chandeliers, the mantelpiece clock, French, it's the property of the family. Yes, of the Sheremetev family, I mean. But as you can see, the artworks are very, very different, and I don't know every artwork, but I will be pointing out to some really important ones. Okay, this is the stalker room. And as you enter, it might seem that this is the wallpapers. And is it the white wallpapers with the red spots? Oh, sorry, not red, green spots, or the green wallpapers with white spots? You just need to choose. None. Neither, because it's stucco, like I think the name shows, right? The name of the room speaks for itself. And it shows as you come closer, you can see that every wall and also the ceiling is covered in these 3D stucco moldings and the meander, every once in a while. Like it's crazy and it's so impractical. I just keep thinking how this taco would be dusted. I mean, okay, you know what? Sheremetevs, they had gazillions of serfs, but you know what? In 1861, serfdom was eh, put to an end, and which definitely was a huge blow to the assets, of the Sheremetevs because there was no longer really free uh, workforce. But they really didn't stop collecting art and they didn't stop supporting, different, culture facilities, educational facilities. That was crazy. And I'm pretty sure they always had enough staff, to dust the rooms. But just imagine how the servants just hated cleaning this room. You will see it. You will see it's 3D. Just think of it. I haven't seen a room like that in any other palace. We've seen a lot of rooms, but you know what I mean? And this, I think that was the personal choice of well, this is the decoration of the second half of the 19th century. So I'm not sure if it's the son or the grandsons, either Dmitri or Sergei Dmitrievich, right? So it's either the son or the grandson of Richard Gere and Julia Roberts, Nikolai Sheremetev and Praskovia, right? But so this is their design, like second half of the 19th century, and the Sheremetevs specifically chose this room to make it the room of the portrait gallery of the Romanovs, because every aristocratic family had to have the like the hall of glory of the Romanovs, because it was just because it was a common flaw. It was a common flaw, and it would have been a great faux pas just not having this. There was just no way they could not but have the room of the Romanovs, and that's why there is the painting or portrait of Catherine the Great. But this portrait didn't even belong to the Romanov family. It comes from the Obolensky family collection, which was just placed here, and just that. But yeah, so that stucco room was a big deal, and it's still a big deal. It's still a big deal. And you know what? What I totally forgot, not forgot, but like, okay, there is one thing. Do you see a piano there? The vertical piano or the upright piano. That's a 19th century European piano. That's just a usual piano, but it's just upright. So everything is placed vertically, but it's worked just absolutely the same. It's just the position, it's just like that. And it had a really lovely name, Giraffe. That's the giraffe piano because it reminds us of a giraffe, right? Just that. Okay. And now we can go on. Just like, oh. Anyway, let's move on. So we are in the white drawing room. There you go. Oh, well, it's white because of the color of the upholstery. I think it's just all clear. And also it has the great collection of sculptures. A lot of photographs are from the open sources, but some of them are from my camera roll. I spent like just 1 week only studying in this palace, like from dusk to dawn. And it's nothing compared to a month at the Hermitage, while we were studying. But it was like, oh, I think I could just stay there, like, overnight as well, but I didn't. Yes. So speaking of because there was so much of the artwork collection, this is also the photo I added. It's from the stucco room, just another photo of the Romanov portrait gallery. Sheremetevs had a really big collection of statues, sculptures, and some of the really, really valuable ones. They had gazillions of them in every estate, everywhere around the Russian Empire. And they also had a lot of it here. A lot of the sculptures eventually ended up in the Hermitage collection and other palaces. I think nearly every museum contributed from the Sheremetev collection after the revolution. Honestly, it's like probably, I don't know, a fraction of the sculpture that probably had been here during the Sheremetev's time. The chandelier is original, but restored, of course, and this is porcelain because it can be otherwise, right? And also the decoration, the gilded stucco of the design of the ceiling is very similar to it has the elements of the coat of arms of the Sheremetevs. We could see them on the fence. We could see them on the gate entering the palace, and that was done by design, of course. They had two crowns. On the coat of arms, they actually have two crowns. They have a smaller one that's kind of their crown, and a bigger crown that's the crown of the Romanovs. Crazy. Yeah. Uh, the artworks are from well, these the still lives are from the Sheremetev collection. So as I said, just a fraction of the artworks in the museum now are they belong to the Sheremetev collection. And this is just one of those. Sheremetevs were so good and meticulous about their art. They tried to have an artwork that belonged to every school, every European school, every European country, and they just had everything. And a little bit of the Dutch art are from originally their collection. But so the musical instruments, this piano belonged to the Yusupov family. As I said, the musical instruments come from everywhere. And this is just the amazingly decorated piano, 19th century. I think we were told the brand, well, it's not written here, but we were told the brand, and I couldn't find the information, but it's like a really big brand, and this is like exclusive work. I mean, like semi-precious ornamental stones, mosaic, bronze. Oh, crazy. And it was in the Yusupov collection. I can't tell you whether it was just also part of the Yusupov collection or the Yusupov actually played it, but you know what? A lot of musical instruments, like this piano, for example, that's also 19th century, like Grand Becker factory. This instrument belonged to Rubinstein. The Rubinstein family, the two brothers, Anton Rubinstein and his brother, they were the founders of the music schools of the conservatories of Saint Petersburg and Moscow. And you know what? A lot of these historic instruments are on the go. I mean, you can play them. They are in a very good condition. Very good. And sometimes the museum throws concerts, arrange concerts, and you could actually come and listen to a concert played on a 19th century piano that belonged to Anton Rubinstein. Crazy, just crazy. I love this museum. It's incredible. I have been to a couple of concerts. Maybe I think I've only been to one concert, unfortunately. I there are so many, I used to be so cynical maybe in a way because I thought I could go to any concert whenever I wanted, but it just kept putting it off because there was so much work, and then there was Grisha, and then and look where I am now doing just this, you know, virtual tours. So pathetic, right? So just, wherever you are, just, grab yourself and just go to a museum, that you think you'll always have a chance to go to. Just go. Stop putting things off. I mean it. Okay. And maybe this is my absolute favorite, the golden drawing room. It's golden because I think, because of the ceiling mainly. And this is the golden room because it also has like a great deal of musical instruments. That's the white dining room, which has been there. And this is the last room we are going to visit today. That's like, I mean, we well, just to have a look at the room itself. That's the furniture. A lot of marquetry furniture from the collection, 19th century, and the lights. I like the lights, and I like this combination of different shades of brown. And in the heart of the room, there is a piano, the piano that belonged to the Mikhail Glinka. And this is the piano at which Mikhail Glinka composed the opera Ruslan and Ludmila, for example. And also, I will be sharing some music pieces. So there will be music. And I just would like to warn you that it might be a little too loud on your end. And you might want to maybe adjust the volume, turn it down a little bit, just not to have it too loud, because I guess it's just going to be different depending on your devices and your settings. I just don't want to scare you because that's what happens to me every time I share recordings. So, and remember, I told you that these exhibits are in a very good condition. So, Mikhail Glinka, there's also Mikhail Glinka, just in case one of the like this mighty handful, the mighty five of the biggest, composers of 19th century Russia. And we have spoken about Blinka, several times. So this is his piano. He spent quite a lot of hours working on this piano. And you know what? Um, Sheremetev's house in general was like Mecca for every celebrity visiting St. Petersburg, and obviously every musician visiting St. Petersburg, including Ferenc Liszt. So Ferenc Liszt was in this palace. He didn't play the musical instrument that belonged to Mikhail Glinka, but Ferenc Liszt is known to have performed his pieces in the golden drawing room, because this was one of the, splendid gala rooms, because it was golden. And Ferenc Liszt visited it several times. Ferenc Liszt visited Russia several times, and every time he was in Russia, in St. Petersburg, he visited Sheremetev's Palace because it was a must. Not only do we have the piano that belonged to Mikhail Glinka, we also have the violin that belonged to Mikhail Glinka, because Mikhail Glinka was a very talented multi-instrumentalist, and this is his violin. And I told you that at any point I could have just attended a concert where they could play, where they played piano of Anton Rubinstein, or they could play a piano that belonged to Glinka, or a violin that belonged to Glinka. And you know what I missed? They had a concert where musicians played both the piano and the violin that belonged to Mikhail Glinka. And that's a bummer. I didn't even know about the concert, but I found a reel on Instagram that I just screen recorded, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not sorry. I don't have any other way to share it with you. It's just a little, like 20 seconds maybe, of a concert where both musical instruments are being played, and they are in such a good condition. So it's probably going to be loud on your end. I don't really know. I just warned you. The only thing is I need to check if the sound is right. So I'm going to just share it once again. Yeah, that's okay. Because, I wasn't sure I had the settings right, but now that I have the settings right, we are going back to the golden drawing room. There you go. That's Mikhail Glinka. Yeah, okay. So we should be good. That's the button. Lovely. That's everything I have been able to find. This concert was held in like 2023, so I couldn't have been there. And it's just, one of those, I could have been there, moments, and I have 20 of them every day. That's my diet, of the self-pity. But that's okay. Yeah. And you probably have noticed some violence there, right? But before that, they just let's just praise the beautiful ceiling. So the ceiling is all covered in pure gold because that's what they did, you know. And it's gilded, and then above the gold, on the gold, they would just have these designs made in paint. So it's not gold on paint, but it's paint on gold because it's giving you way more golden coverage. So you would know, right? So you know that there's more golden paint. And of course, it's restoration, right? But that's just what this room has been like. Well, apart from the Soviet period, of course, when I'm not sure if the gold was there during the Soviet period, and of course, beautiful rock crystal, and also some portraits. But some portraits actually have a lot to do with the collection. Well, not all of them, but well, let's put it like this. This portrait might look very similar to the portraits of the Romanov that I have shared with you, but that's the portrait of Anna Sheremeteva. And Anna Sheremeteva she was the wife of she was just the wife of the Sheremetevs, and so they too were like uh, I told you that all the Sheremetevs had very much like European mindset, but here it was like different. So Anna Sheremeteva had a very European mindset, but Sheremetev, her husband, was more like into in collecting Russian art, in supporting like well, Dmitry Sheremetev was like into more like Russophile, but meaning well, he was like into more like preservation of like Russian culture, supporting of Russian artists, and so on and so forth. But so, uh, but they were actually a very good couple, and they probably amassed twice as much as than let's say Nikolai Sheremetev, right? The Richard Gere, story. Just like saying, helping you understand which of the Sheremetevs I'm talking about, and that's the portrait that was made by Christina Robertson. Christina Robertson was hired by the Romanovs to just paint every Romanov and every aristocrat. So that's why, of course, the Sheremetevs absolutely had to have a portrait by Christina Robertson. And just look at this amazing furniture. And this is a piano, 19th century marquetry. And but so and this but there are also some family members and friends, and that's the portrait of the husband Dmitry, but it's a graphic portrait. And there is you also must have noticed some musical instruments. So those violins are really important, really special, and especially one violin. It belonged to the composer Alexei Lvov, who also a violinist, violin player. He had a quartet. He had a string quartet, and he was in charge of the army choir. So he was a musical prodigy, and his quartet traveled all around the Russian Empire and even in Europe. He was like really well-known violin player in the, let's say, worldwide. And he was a composer. He had the time to compose music, and he owned a violin that was made by the son of Antonio Stradivari. Well, we all know Stradivari, but not everyone knows that his son also made violins. And one of the violins, which has, all the documents and everything, was the property of Lvov. And you can see this in his portraits. This is the photo of Lvov. And this violin is in the collection of the museum, is the one closest to us, the one that's most to the right in this showcase. Crazy, right? And also Lvov is known. Well, it's there to the right. Yeah, it's the one to the right. And also Lvov, which is going to be the last thing because we also already need to wrap it up. Dolly, thank you so much for your tips, by the way. Also, Lvov is known as the one who composed the music for the very first Russian national anthem, God Save the Tsar. And with this violin, well, he also performed, premiered the anthem to the Romanovs, and well, it's there's also lyrics and everything, but I just thought to wrap up this episode with just a little, 1 minute of a recording I found on YouTube. Also screen recorded it. This is the footage of the Romanovs and a very good recording of God Save the Tsar anthem. God didn't save the Tsar, but you know the story. Well, I thought since it's the tour of the Museum of Musical Instruments, we could use some music. Um, so we did. Okay, let me open up the chat. And again, it's good to see a lot more of you. It's now a lot more people than we had at the beginning. I hope you have enjoyed this tour, and I hope you have enjoyed the interiors. And as I said, there is still so much more of St. Petersburg locations that we haven't seen. And I wasn't joking. Let me know if you have any questions in the meantime. Since I'm not sure if you see the previous messages, I'm going to share with you the links for the next episode, which is already scheduled. It's going to be July 25th. And also I'm sharing the 3 links for the 3 tours for tomorrow, and also sharing the links to the usual way where my website, where you can find a lot more tours already up for the upcoming weekends. And there's quite a lot of them, actually. Also, this is where the recordings will be of this weekend, and the previous recordings of previous weekend are already there. If you enjoyed the tour, of course, you can support me by either sending a PayPal donation or buying me a coffee. And just in case, for my sponsors, in August, there's going to be a big get together, and hoping for some, visitors, big guests, so to speak. But I'll keep you posted about it. So I'm just saying, and just in case, there are more than 1,100 videos now available from my sponsors. Thank you so much for being here with me. Thank you, Dolly. I'm glad you have enjoyed these tours. Thank you, Adrian. So I promise that for every episode of the tour of the Museum of Musical Instruments, we're going to have at least some music, because it can't be otherwise. Whenever I can, I share the content, but I'm not sure whether I'll be able to share this recording in full on YouTube because of the copyright thing. I'll let you know. I might have to be sharing through my with at least, or probably without the music pieces. We'll see what YouTube tells me to do. We'll see that. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. And let me know if you're interested, let's say for the winter, uh, if you are interested in the tours of the Moscow estates of, let's say, Sheremetev's family or the Yusup's family, because I have been to all of them. And I know Oleg will be in Moscow in September or maybe early October. And well, if I arrange it in advance, he'll definitely find a day for just to record for me. Mary, thank you so much that you have enjoyed it and then you've learned, things from me. You love the instruments and music. I'm happy that you did. And yeah, so it can be otherwise. We have to, listen to some music on the tour of the musical instruments. And it amazes me that they still play these 19th century things. I mean, because Oleg will be in Moscow, I think in the fall only. So for the winter time, at least, I think for the winter season of my tours, I could be taking you to all those gorgeous estates that belong to the Sheremetevs and the Yusupovs and probably the Romanovs. But please don't think there's nothing else to see in St. Petersburg. Like honestly, it's not the case. Not the Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you so much. So, thank you everyone for joining me. I think Grisha needs me to read him to sleep because otherwise, I don't think he'll ever go into to sleep. Like I can't let that happen. Thank you for everything. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your interest in my tours. And just in case, if you missed my live walk in Tbilisi for virtual tours, is going to be available hopefully 24 hours later. That's tomorrow. This time it should be already available at virtualtours.online/recordings. But if you have problem locating it, just do let me know and I will share this recording with you. Just the link because I don't really have access or any control of that myself. And I will share the recordings of the final episode of the Bolshoi Avenue and the visit to the Museum of Alexander Popov shortly. And I can't wait to catch up with you tomorrow for 3 really diverse tours. Thank you for everything and bye bye.